welcome to the 14th Leadership Skills Development Summit 2021. It truly is an honor to have you tuned in onto this platform in the midst of the COVID pandemic. We know that 2021 is set to highlight the ever-increasing need for investment in skills development, particularly in the face of new trends, market volatility, and also related expectations where skills shortages are concerned. Remember the head of IBM, Mr. Hamilton, who once said there's a difference between employment and unemployability. And the true distinction between those who are unemployed and those who are unemployable is a skill. And we need to explore in this particular summit, what are the particular skills that are required to drive our
that welcome, honored guests and ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you at this important summit. Now, I want to start by quoting a 2021 International Labour Organization report, which was titled Skills Development in the Time of COVID-19, which noted that the COVID-19 pandemic is the most significant health crisis that the world has faced in the past 100 years. It has disrupted our living with unprecedented consequences for our daily lives, including how we work and how we learn. 14% of working hours were lost globally in the second quarter of 2020 when compared to the last quarter of 2019. The report further notes that, and I quote, "This loss is equivalent to 480 million full-time jobs, an indication of a massive disruption of labor markets around the world. The situation jeopardizes the accomplishment of the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular Goal 8, which states that we should promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all." And its target 8.5, which calls for achievement by 2030 of full and productive employment and decent work for all. As it relates to the impact on the workplace, the report notes that there is an important change in the work modality, as roughly 1/3 of the world's workers live in countries where workplaces were required to close, with the exception of those for essential workers. And another 42% of workers were in countries with partial workplace closures. As it relates to the impact on education, the report makes the point that major disruptions were faced in the education sector, setting back progress in the achievement of Goal 4 of the SDG, which is ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. At the peak of the crisis in late March 2020, close to 1.6 billion students worldwide were affected by school closure. Education and training institutions struggled to achieve a timely compliance with physical distancing measures in order to contain the spread of the pandemic and to switch from face-to-face training to distance learning. South Africa was obviously not immune to the multidimensional impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The National Income Dynamic Coronavirus Rapid Mobile Survey knows that during the first wave of the pandemic, while many lives were saved, approximately 2.8 billion people lost their jobs under the lockdown. This figure represents an 18% decline in employment between February to April 2020. Just this week, Stats SA informed us that South Africa's unemployment rate rose to 32.6% in the first quarter of 2021 from 32.5% in the previous period. This was the highest job loss rate since comparable data began in 2008. This means that the number of unemployed persons increased by 8,000 to 7.2 million. Employment fell by 28,000 to 15 million, and the labor force went down by 20,000 to 22.2 million. And a further breakdown suggests that the total employment fell mostly in construction, which is minus 87,000, trade, which lost 84,000, private households, which lost 70,000, transportation services at 40,000, and agriculture, but it rose sharply in financial services with an additional 215,000 jobs created. Furthermore, the expanded definition of unemployment, including people who have stopped looking for work, was at 43.2%, up from 42.6% in the prior period. Also, young people and the rate of youth unemployment, measuring job seekers between 15 and 24 years old, hit a new record high of 63.3%. Now, in response to all of this, government developed the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, and in support of this plan, we as a department have developed a skills strategy to support the implementation of the Economic Recovery Plan, and which, as you might be aware, was presented to Cabinet on the 29th of January this year. Our skills strategy set out a set of core interventions to ensure the effective implementation of the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan. There's a particular focus on interventions to allow large numbers of young people to access opportunities in the short term, to ensure that they are able to be absorbed into high potential growth sectors in order to boost job creation. To this end, various sectors have already committed and others are finalizing their commitments to investment in occupations identified in the skills strategy, such as the initial commitment by the Manufacturing, Engineering and Related Services Education and Training Authority, or MESITA, of about 77.8 million to support centers of specialization. The MICT SITA is focusing on digital skills such as data science, cybersecurity, software development, cloud computing, cell phone repairs, with a budget of about 69 million. The Agricultural Sector Education and Training Authority has initially committed for the next 3 years a budget of about 49 million to support learners in agricultural colleges, and this is critical to the Economic Recovery Plan's priority intervention relating to agriculture and food security. Is it related to the National Skills Fund, despite the 3.3 billion from the surplus of the NSF towards the National Student Financial Aid Scheme shortfall to support education and training through bursaries. Initiatives in the NSF Skills Development Project pipeline in 2021-2022 will proceed as planned. The NSF's priorities in the current financial year include artisan development, occupational programs through the TVET colleges, and interventions geared towards people with disabilities, digital skills, and also innovation. The National Skills Fund is also targeting the expansion of funding for small, medium, and macro enterprises and cooperative skills development and rural focus funding to support local and rural development initiatives through the district-led model. The various interventions of the National Skills Fund will support the skills development of 60,000 beneficiaries. For example, the NSF Artisan Development Request for Proposals targeted at public entities and state-owned companies for the benefit of 4,000 apprentices in the first 2 years will be launched on the 11th of April next year. This follows the funding application for the first phase of the Artisan Request for Proposals aimed at private skills providers that closed in 2020 and to benefit 4,500 apprentices in 2 years from this year into the next financial year. From the 2021 academic year, all our 50 public TVET colleges will benefit over 20,000 learners with access to training opportunities through the National Skills Fund's 2.2 billion funding window. The funding is toward occupationally directed programs up to 2024 and entails apprenticeships, learnerships, skills program, work integrated learning, capacity building, as well as specialized equipment. The 2.9 billion allocation by the National Skills Fund and sector education and training authorities towards the TVET infrastructure development in various campuses has yielded positive result. Of the 13 campuses in the Eastern Cape, KZN and Mpumalanga, 6 sites have achieved practical completion and are at the occupational phase. This include the refurbished Mchasana TVET Nongoma campus in KwaZulu-Natal, the new Eastern Cape Midlands TVET in the Graf Reinet campus in the Eastern Cape, the new SIED TVET Umzinkulu campus in KZN, the refurbished Umfolozi TVET Nkandla A campus in KZN, and the new Ikala TVET Aliwal North campus in the Eastern Cape, and the refurbished Waterberg TVET Tabazimbi campus in Limpopo. The completion of the remaining TVET college sites remains a critical intervention for increasing the capacity of TVET colleges to provide access for young people who are not in employment, education, or training, and enroll more students in critical occupational programs. This includes 5 sites expected to be completed during this year, which includes the Umgungundlovu TVET, the new Ingwe TVET, the new the new Umgungundlovu TVET College Greytown campus in KZN, and the new Ikala TVET in Aliwal North, and the refurbished Mchasana TVET in KZN. Also, the construction of the new Gersibande TVET Balfour campus in Mpumalanga is expected to be completed in 2022-2023. These are but just some of the interventions that we're making as a department in support of government's economic reconstruction and recovery plan. We're fully aware that it would require much more than government intervention for us to put on our country on the path of full economic recovery. And for this reason, I wish to encourage all our social partners to continue working with us and for us to intensify the national efforts towards economic recovery. I wish you a productive summit and look forward to the outcomes of your deliberations. And thank you for listening.
An economy starved of skills will falter and fail. Thus, South Africa's first democratic government armed itself in the year 2000 with a powerful skills development framework, founding several sector education and training authorities, or SETAs. The Finance and Accounting Service Sector Education and Training Authority, FASET, uplifts the skills that are the lifeblood of the economy. The accountants, investment managers, auditors and finance managers who control the purse strings and wealth management and who make the funding decisions that advance the country. FASET seeks to achieve world-class finance and accountancy skills and to increase the flow of new entrants into employment. To deliver on its mandate while remaining effective and relevant, FASET developed #LastingLegacy, a finely focused approach emanating from its original mandate. The strategy hinges on 2 pillars: facilitating placement of learners into employment through learnerships and internships, and academic support for learners to complete their degrees or professional designations. FASET's discretionary funding supports African Black people in all provinces and coloured people in the Western and Northern Cape. FASET has long been acknowledged as a front-runner and pace-setter among SETAs.
Deputy Minister of Higher Education, Science and Technology, Honorable Buti Manamela. We thank him very much for the commitment that he has as an ambassador of the Skills Development Summit. He really comes through when we are having these engagements, and do look out for the projects that the department is currently initiating to ensure that the skills shortage is curbed and is addressed accordingly. Without further ado, I wish to invite our next keynote address, Ms. Paula Quinn, Lucy. She'll be speaking to us about, growth mindset and emotional intelligence as also a critical skill that we need to have, not only as entrepreneurs, but in the employment workplace. And I realized that there was a study, Paula, that was conducted saying that companies on average are losing about $40 million per annum because of the lack of emotional intelligence with the employees. So I really look forward to hearing what you have to say to us today. She is from Growth Mindset Catalyst, which is Attitude Communications. And thank you very much, Paula. Over to you.
Thanks, Tabang, and hello everyone. Welcome to be here today. So yeah, the World Economic Forum's latest report has shared that 50% of all employees will need to be reskilled by 2025. 50%, so that's half of your workforce. And what they're saying or predicting is that the top 10 essential skills predicted for 2025 fall into 4 different categories. And those categories are technology use and development, problem solving, self-management, and working with people. And of those 10 top skills predicted for 2025, 8 of the 10 fall into what is commonly referred to as soft skills. I like to call them human skills because it's what makes us human. It's that human side of us that what people may refer to as the warm and fuzzy, or the emotional intelligence, the personal mastery, or self-awareness, mindfulness, whatever term you want to call it. But 8 of the top 10 skills fall into the soft skills category. So what does that mean exactly? Well, when it comes to technology use and development, besides the AI and robotics that we were all talking about in the 4th Industrial Revolution, it's as simple as noticing the tech trends and the apps that are constantly popping up. But more importantly, at a very simple level, it's just about becoming tech savvy. And we've all had to grapple with that. Like right now, getting used to operating on Zoom or MS Teams or GoWebinar, whatever platform or channel that you have been operating on for the last 18 months. From a problem-solving point of view, it's really about the critical thinking, innovative, creative productivity, how to project manage your time, as well as the different tasks or projects or outputs or deliverables that you are responsible for. Working with people is really your social skills, and it's really about building relationships. It's about leading and influencing, especially in a remote environment now, which has thrown a lot of leaders upside down and that, because we're so used to leading in the workplace and in person that it takes very different skill sets to lead in a remote world. It's also about engagement and how do we keep our teams and our companies engaged? How do we keep the corporate culture alive? And more importantly, how do we collaborate in an online environment versus an in-person environment? It was very quick and easy to walk across the passage to someone's desk or go and grab a coffee and have a coffee chat together or brainstorm around a table. But how do we do that in a remote environment? And then from a self-management point of view, what everybody is talking about is resilience. It's a big buzzword that's being thrown around. How do we be more resilient? How do we talk about self-awareness, confidence, growth mindsets? How do we focus? How do we be more effective? And how do we take care of our own well-being? Mental health being very topical at the moment. And so what does that mean when we talk about mental health? And what a lot of people actually mean when they say mental health is they're talking about self-care routines and time off devices and being able to implement boundaries. But what we're not talking about is the full spectrum of mental health issues, such as depression, chronic loneliness, isolation, and disconnect, and the impact that this has on our immune system. And there's global research that was done long before COVID came about on the looming loneliness epidemic, where the research shows that the impact on our immune system is the equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, making it much more deadlier than obesity. And can you imagine, the impact on what that does to someone who feels like they are alone in this world? And even though we are online and we are connected to our teammates and to our friends and our family members, people are still experiencing loneliness and isolation and disconnect. And next to this, the next biggest concern for companies and a lot of corporates that I'm working with is that of burnout. A lot of people are claiming that they are fatigued, they are digitally fatigued, they don't have energy, their productivity levels are dropping. And so there's three things that really contribute to burnout, and that is exhaustion, so being overextended, so working longer hours than before. And I know many people that are saying that their personal hours and their work hours are being blurred into one. I was talking to a person that I was working with a couple of weeks ago, saying that they are working until 10, 11 o'clock at night because of the project that they're working on and the deadlines and deliverables that they have to adhere to. Another thing that gets us down in terms or contributes to burnout is cynicism or negative, either negative mindsets, or we're being exposed to negative environments, whether that's a toxic workplace and toxic culture, or just the people that we are being exposed to that are fatigued, that are disengaged, that are just not able to carry on anymore because we've been trying to put up a brave face for the last 18 months. We've tried to, rah, we can do this, we can get through this. We started baking banana bread, we started doing all of these things. But the longer we've gone into lockdown and experienced different levels of lockdown, it's become unsustainable because life is not one constant high all the time. Life has ups and downs, and we've started to realize that we are actually human, and that there are days where we struggle to drag ourselves out of bed. And then this negative self-evaluation around questioning our purpose in life, questioning our roles in the workplace, questioning our deliverables, and questioning the meaning of life at large. And a lot of people are feeling lost in terms of their identity and where they fit in. They're questioning their identity, especially if they have experienced lots of loss in their life. So real loss in terms of COVID and people close to them, but also simple things that we never really registered before. The simple act of getting up and going to an office or a place gave us a sense of purpose. It gave us a sense of we had somewhere to go to and somewhere to be in, a place to belong each day. And that's been taken away from us. And now we're trying to find a new way of belonging in a virtual and remote world. And it's taking a lot more effort from us on a human perspective, and especially from a leadership perspective. So some of the things that are triggering mental health issues is long hours, no breaks, unrealistic expectations, not feeling valued or appreciated, not feeling supported by our managers or our peers or our organization, job insecurity, and alone working. Spending long hours at home in the same room, online, back to back, gives us that sense of cabin fever and the walls closing in on us. And these are very real things that we are all dealing with in our own way because it affects everybody differently. There's also something that we are not talking about under the mental health banner, and that is gender-based violence and harassment. We have seen the stats spike globally as well as locally from a divorce perspective, but also in terms of gender-based violence. And a lot of companies are now having to start implementing gender-based violence awareness training, as well as updating and reviewing their policies to accommodate and cater for abuse in the home, which has now become the workplace, as well as online. Sexual harassment generally used to take place in the workplace or outside of physical workspaces, but we're now seeing a spike in the online space too. And we've had to update our employee wellness initiatives to cater for these support structures that we need to put in place. So what does that mean from a skills perspective? Well, from a leadership perspective, we've had to develop new leadership skills. The two key ones being holistic and empathetic. Holistic being we are now seeing our employees as the whole. We are managing them in their personal, intimate space, in their home environment. we're seeing what they're struggling with on a day-to-day basis with managing the roles of juggling work and life and home, and having to homeschool kids and take care of other people as well, whether it be elderly parents or other people in their home environment. And we've had to be empathetic towards their needs and towards what they are going through, while at the same time trying to take care of ourselves and our own mental health and well-being. So having to be empathetic that, yes, our work structure, we may have had our team meetings at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, but we actually can't do that or expect our employees to be online at 10 o'clock because some of them may be homeschooling their children. So we've had to become much more flexible and adaptable and adjust our structures accordingly as we see and work with our employees from a whole level. Mental toughness has become a big thing. We've had to really drag ourselves out of bed on some days and to be productive and proactive. And there are 3 key skills that we are having to develop for ourselves as individuals. The first one being self-leadership, which really just means that how do I find the ability to consciously influence my own thoughts and behavior in order to achieve my personal and or the organization's goals and objectives. On those days where I'm finding it that I'm really struggling, what support structures do I tap into? Who do I speak to? How do I make sure that I can still deliver, even if it is only 3 tasks for that day, which in itself could be seen as a success? The next one is self-discipline, and self-discipline is really about finding a compelling reason to do something and committing ourselves to see that task or that activity through to the very end. Being remote, we may feel like we are out of the loop. We are not in touch with what the rest of the team or the organization is doing. And this is where communication is required. And I say to organizations that I work with, you cannot over communicate. Rather over communicate and let people know what's going on. Even if there are sensitive issues you cannot disclose, but disclose as much as you can to keep people in the loop, to feel like they are a part of what's going on and that they know that their needs are being catered for, and that they also know where the organization and the company is at and what steps the company is taking to keep the business going, as well as to give everybody a sense of that where their contribution is contributing to different areas of the business and that they are being valued and appreciated in the process. And then adaptability, which is what a lot of people are referring to as resilience, being able to adapt to difficult situations and managing our emotions in the same process to be able to keep functioning and operating, to do what needs to get done on a daily basis. We've also had to redefine what success looks like for us. For some people, the fact that we still have our health and our well-being, that we have not yet contracted COVID 18 months down the line, in itself is success. We've had to look at putting different support structures in place, both internally within our organizations. We've had to relook at our employee wellness support offerings, and also our training and development needs to help our staff to be upskilled and reskilled, because even though our job functions and our job titles haven't changed, the way that we work and where we work certainly has changed. We've had to look at different training needs for our staff, and we've had to also align it to the business strategy and where businesses are going. We've also had to look at taking ourselves and updating and upskilling ourselves in our own personal capacity, together with what the organization is offering us from an opportunity perspective. And then the capacity to celebrate life in the smallest of ways. The fact that we still have our jobs, the fact that we still have our health, the fact that we may still have our loved ones around us, but also being able to remember the people that were close to us that potentially have been a casualty of the last 18 months. Being able to implement mindfulness techniques and being fully present in the here and the now, the self-care routines, taking breaks, implementing the 90-20 rule. Research shows that 90 minutes online, 20 minutes offline doing other activities to give ourselves a break from being constantly online all the time. And being able to put boundaries down and push back and say, no, I'm not able to cope with this, or I'm not able to deal with this, or that it's okay to put your hand up and say, I'm not okay and that I need help. And that this does not make us weak, it does not make us ineffective or non-productive, it just makes us human at the end of the day. And how do we find that elusive work-life balance? How do we find harmony in what we're doing from a personal perspective, but as well as from an organization perspective? And this is where a lot of companies that I'm working with are starting to implement routines and boundaries to assist staff in dealing with work-life balance. For example, one company has made Wednesdays no online meeting day to actually help employees not be online all the time and to give them time to work on other tasks and other projects in different ways, whether that be thinking time, strategic time, or taking some time off for themselves. And then good health and keeping yourself safe, obviously within the COVID realms and the way that we deal with our day-to-day life in terms of our own families and our own personal structures, but also keeping it alive in the workplace and keeping our employees safe too. So at the end of the day, money doesn't make the world go round. Relationships do, and your people do. Your people are your business, and without your people, you don't really have a business, or at least one that can be effective and productive and deliver on what's being required from a business perspective and a strategy perspective and objectives and deliverables. So you either have a positive or a negative impact on the world. There is no in between, but at the end of the day, it takes all of us to collaborate and to be there together to develop our human skills and to be there for each other and support each other to not only thrive personally, but also to thrive as organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paula. That truly was an informative discussion about how do we apply emotional literacy and intelligence in the workplace and how costly it truly is. We thank you for your time. And indeed, we open up the platform for those who need to ask questions to do so and to also get in touch with you to learn more about the subject matter. Thank you very much, Paula.
The community enterprise exhibition. Key question, why did we engage with the community? We always focus on the youth, we always focus on our students. But where do our students come from? They come from the community. And how can we grow communities where students see role models experiencing entrepreneurship? That led to our discussion in 2018 to say we need to look at combining community entrepreneurs. So today we are standing at an awesome event. An event filled with vibrancy, filled with opportunity, connecting SMMEs with awesome opportunity. And I need to reiterate this, that this is the first year we're doing it. It's a pioneering year for us, and our aspiration is to do this on an annual basis.
My name is Sipho Setu Stefani from Khayelitsha Travel and Tours. We are based in Khayelitsha, a tour company based in Khayelitsha, operating since 2013, so close to 7 years now. We offer township tours, customized tour packages flights, accommodation, and transfers. Also, in partnership with MSC Cruises, we also offer cruise experiences, and car rental in partnership with Bitfist. Yes. CFERI, an initiative, a brilliant initiative for all entrepreneurs who want to grow their business, who want to sustain new lessons or change their negative aspects about their business.
The purpose of it all, entrepreneurs don't have a platform to showcase their product offering. They're sometimes the best kept secret. So how do we bring visibility to SMMEs? How do we connect SMMEs with financial support and with non-financial support? The platform today creates two critical stakeholders coming together, community entrepreneurs with financial stakeholders and non-financial stakeholders. We raise up the credibility, and that is another key reason of why we have engaged on this path to showcase entrepreneurs at this community. And finally, profitability. So it's visibility, it's credibility, and profitability. Lots of businesses close down because they don't have sufficient cash flow. Why not? Because of market. And by doing this today, raising their visibility, it will lead to orders, it will lead to new clients, it will lead to interest from business to business as well as business to customer. Doing that in an environment that's structured gives them credibility, trustworthiness, and ultimately that will lead to profitability.
The training from CFE was amazing. One, I knew some of the information that they had, but how they said it was amazing. It made more sense because, when you're in a journey, you get information along the way, but the way they tell, the way they teach, the way they're so open to, willingness to teach and show us, ways on how to do certain things that we're already doing, but easier ways, and get in contact with more people. And the classes were very interactive. So now the journey is starting our own factory, which will be able to open up opportunities to hire more people to work for the shop, and also have our social impact quite visible within the community, because that's what we are about. We want people to be encouraged, we want people to be inspired, we want people to know that even if you have different thoughts, your surroundings should not limit you. So this event is amazing. I've never been to an event like this before, where there's a lot of entrepreneurs, where the focus gets to be on a business itself and then another business. So we get different opportunities to talk to different people, and different people coming to us and us going to them. And the fact that we get to network with different companies from different spaces that we didn't even know, and we get to ask questions, because some companies or some organizations are far from us. And we're in a township. As much as we're running a business, sometimes you struggle to even get money to go to town, because the business is new. The business is still trying to even find itself. So this space is quite healthy and encouraging and just friendly. Yes.
As SIDA, our mandate is very clear, is that we need to support SMMEs. And then we do that in association and partnership with various stakeholders in the province. So when we were approached from the Center for Entrepreneurship, Rapid Incubator, to work with them, to support, township businesses. And then you would recall that township businesses or township economy is one of our priority areas So we are on board, and then we are happy that this has now been announced that it's going to be an annual event, and then it's a journey that we are prepared, to go with the incubator for the next for many years.
Our expectations. When you dream about an event and when it actually happens, you will see if it meets it or if it exceeds it. And in this case today, I must say, it exceeded our wildest expectations. We had our entrepreneurs showcasing products. I had a particular product in mind that they stated to me in the workshops. It went beyond that. The workman's quality, the way in which they presented itself, it all speaks to them putting in the effort. And on top of that, amazing. We had amazing stakeholders coming here today saying, we don't just want to be here, we also want to contribute to this. So it's amazing stakeholders such as NewPay coming on board, Yoko coming on board here for the first time, organizations coming on board for the first time with websites. So this have totally blown my expectations for the day and exceeded it exponentially. All of this can only be possible with like-minded partners. And another key partner who came on board with a financial support of 50,000 Rand is the Beers. And we are thankful for the Beers, and we trust that this relationship will continue 2020 and even beyond. So thank you, the Beers, for coming on board and for creating a moment that will take 5 SMMEs to the next level. Appreciate it tremendously.
Wow, I am the top winner of this competition. Thank you so much, CFE, for the opportunity to be here. It's been an amazing experience. The competition has created a platform for us to market, for us to create awareness, and for...
My screen sharing is disabled, so I can't share it. You've disabled it. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for still tuning in with us. Please don't forget to hashtag Skills Summit 2021. We did have Ms. Paula Quincy from Growth Mindset Catalyst, and she spoke to us about the importance of communication and emotional intelligence. Without further ado, I wish to welcome Mr. John Foster Pedley, who is the Dean and Director at Henley Business School, Africa. John, we welcome you. You now can share your screen for the presentation. And we look forward to learning a degree, but it's rather about doing the relevant masters and MBA. So how do we align our education to skills development? So we are looking forward to engaging further with your presentation. Mr. Medley, over to you. Thank you.
Yep, thanks. I'm just trying to find the right screen share to do. Welcome, everybody. Well, I just battle with the tech. I think I've got the wrong one out here. Just a second. Let me think. This should work. Skills Summit. There we are. I'm going to put it on full screen. I wonder if that's going to work. Let's hope it does. Okay. So just give me 1 minute, folks, while I sort out my tech here. That didn't work. My initial thing didn't work there. So I'm going to have to find something. All right, I think we're fine. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about leaders for the next 20 years. What are the big skills we need to have? And as this is a Leadership and Skills Development Summit, I'm very privileged to be here and after speaking after my friend Paula Quincy. And it's going to be a great day, I'm sure. I think events like this are really important to do, especially now during lockdown. I mean, we've all got so Zoom friendly these days, haven't we? That just being able to do conferences is easy. And it's almost funny now to do a conference speaking to people in Johannesburg from Johannesburg. I mean, you know, last week I was talking to a conference in Pakistan, and then And then in the UK, it's just like this lockdown has made us instantly global. And I think that that's really an important point to start with. What are the big skills for leaders over the next 20 years? I've got about 15 minutes to cover that. But this sense that we're global now really matters. What do you need to think about? What do we need to think about as we develop our capability in our careers? Obviously, a lot of us focus in leadership as how am I going to get the next job? How am I going to be the leader? How am I going to become the chief executive and all that? It's some big endorsement for us and our capabilities. But the reality of being a leader is not just about position. The big thing is about being a leader is you have to solve bigger problems. And you're never going to be a leader unless you solve big problems. It's all very well elbowing our way to the top because we want to be there and playing the politics to do that. But unless you understand the context you work in, the business you're working in, and unless you can see what size the problems are around you and you can grapple with them, you can never be a really good leader. You will be at best a manager or somebody who's proposing that they're a leader, but not actually doing the job. Because the very simple thing that leaders do, they look at the context around them, they understand what it's like, they understand the challenges that are coming, they think about what they need to do with their own organization, and they think carefully about how can I scale up my organization, how can I continue to create value. And it's not just about sheer competition to beat somebody, it's very much more about solving problems that are going to help people in life. So the first skill I'm going to move on to when we're talking about leaders is going to be the idea that the leaders need to, I'm going to just see if the slide change. Can I just check with you, has the slide changed there? Devang? Has that slide changed okay? Somebody, I'm going to need to know whether that's changed. Can somebody tell me, please, or put it in the chat?
Hi, John. Certainly, it has changed.
Thank you very much. I'm just double checking. I had a problem last week. So the first thing about being a leader is, Norman Adamy of SAB used to say this a lot, is that you have to make reality your friend. And that's a hard thing to do because the reality is not necessarily your reality. There's an old saying is, we see the world as we are, not as it is. We see the world as we are, not as it is. It's really hard to see the world as it is. I mean, I'm a certain sort of person. I come from a certain sort of background. You can guess from my voice, my age, etc., where I've come from. I've been in South Africa for many, many years. South African family. There's people listening. I look at Tabang. She's a very different sort of person, come from a different background. And so is Paula. And so would be Dr. Manuki, for example. They will see life differently from me. Now, who's right and who's wrong? Well, we can argue that forever. But if you think about this, imagine there was this brain sitting there in cyberspace where all our insights were connected to. Your insight about from your lifestyle, the way you see, the reality you see, the reality I see. And if you put those all together, they'd be a bit like dragonfly eyes. Dragonflies have 100 lenses, just separate eyes. And it looks at the world and its brain synthesizes them. It's not looking out through one eye like we are. It's able to look at life through 100 eyes. And when you've got 100 people in a room, you can actually look at life through 100 eyes as well, as long as you can bring those eyes together. And when you get that multiple perspective on life, you can see what reality is like. And it's never what we want it to be. It's often very scary. In fact, we often push reality away because it is scary, because we don't want to look at it. But the great leaders are able to see reality as it is, manage their fear, and stay in the moment and manage it. And the best way to see reality is to synthesize it, to get many, many people's perspectives and bring them together. Great leaders are orchestrators of points of view. They get multiple points of view and they get people to contribute, and then they make sense of that. And it's not their own sense, they make sense of it. Like if you are coming before COVID happened, you could have been saying to yourself, that's not going to happen. It's an awful situation. We're never going to have, a pandemic. We don't want that to happen. But the reality was it was going to happen. We were able to see it and lock down and change our business 2 weeks before lockdown happened, and we've thrived. And so you don't want your pilot to be on autopilot. And your brain is your pilot. Don't let that thing be on autopilot. Continually challenge and change it. This is a lifetime's work. Great leaders do that. The other thing that great leaders do is a little bit less expected as well, is that in these days, you've got to conspiracy proof your mind. And there is somebody wearing a mask. Thank goodness they're wearing a mask, even though the message is saying that she doesn't want to. But we cannot be subject to all these points of view and adjust our own opinion. Any one of us can build a perfect argument based from a very bad premise, a very bad foundation. And that's why having multiple points of view to see reality as it is allows you to build better ideas and solve problems better. You cannot just be dragged into conspiracy. Don't let your mind be polluted in that way. This is your jewel. It's your wonderful, wonderful attribute, your mind and your perception. Don't let people hijack it. Don't be taken by your fears or your identity into seeing one perspective. That is a great leaders who make reality their friends and can manage their perceptions and see life as it is, a much better place to become great leaders. Okay, it might seem counterproductive to you or counterintuitive, but it's not. The next thing we have to do, great leaders have to manage ethics well. And this is a very, very useful diagram, and I'm just going to cover it quickly. There's a difference between things that are legal in law and legitimate, things that we allow through social management. There are a lot of things that are legal and legitimate, you know, having a decent job, driving within the speed limit. You know, something that's illegal but legitimate is often doing, you know, fiddling your taxes. A lot of people say, oh, let's do that, or breaking the speed limit. Or what can easily happen is the insidious movement of corruption in a company. You know, what the KPMG auditors did was actually both illegitimate from their practices and actually illegal. They broke the laws of their practice, but they also broke the laws of their land. So they felt it was legitimate, illegal. They felt it was legitimate for the sake of their company. They could put a false audit in, and they didn't understand how that happened. Things that are legal and illegitimate might be like Google and Facebook with their tax. It's quite legal for them to set up offshore tax havens and pay absolutely zero tax on billions of dollars of revenue. And that's why the G7 last week have now implemented a corporate tax of 15% or what's coming, at least in those 7 countries, which they'll now try and take wider. So that companies like Google and Facebook can't just take all their profits and pay no taxes, not contribute to society. So when you're a leader, we've got to be continually understanding, is this legitimate? And am I allowing illegal things because everybody around me said it's okay? Don't do that. And am I doing illegitimate things that are legal, bad practices? You can actually, it's not necessarily illegal just to be a bad manager or just to bully people. That does, if you do it too much, it becomes illegal, but it's not very legitimate. So what you have to do in our minds as great leaders, they have this matrix welded into their mind. And if you want to grow yourself as a leader over 20 years, I would really think about this. Do some study and really think about the difference between legal and legitimate, because that stuff is really dangerous. And that's where nearly all the corruption comes from. Yeah, no, it's okay, it's fine. I'm going to turn a blind eye. Everybody else is doing it. They're paying bribes. Why shouldn't I? I'll never get the business unless I do it. Just don't do it, because the people who suffer are the poor. And the other areas, the things that are legal and illegitimate, quite often you overlook those as well. So when you think about ethics, there are 3 very simple ways to remember ethics. So the first one is what we call virtue ethics. How do I want to live my life? And this is about what sort of person do I want to be? What sort of person do you want to be as a leader? Do you want to be that person who's just made yourself rich at everyone else's expenses, at the expense of the poor, at the expense of opportunity for everybody else? Is that how you want to be? Are you comfortable with yourself like that? Or do you not want to be that? You've got a choice to make. If you don't want to be like that, then don't do that. It's going to make your life a little harder. But I assure you, in the long run, you'll get more leadership opportunities. The second one is what's the consequence of what I do? Now, those KPMG auditors who signed off those audits allowed then bad practice to happen. They allowed good quality coal to be sold overseas. They allowed poor quality coal to be delivered into Eskom. They allowed low generation of electricity, et cetera, et cetera. What they didn't understand was what happened beyond the boundary of their job and the boundary of their business. There's consequences to behavior in corporate life, both on the environment and on society. And we have to know as leaders, what impact is my behavior having on the world? If you're going to be a true leader, you have to focus on this. There's no way around it. You're never going to be a true leader. You're going to be a greedy, short-term leader. Maybe you'll get a lot of respect from a type of people, but you're not going to be a leader in a sense that I think matters. And the final thing is the deontological ethics. It's a long word, but it fundamentally means working from principles. What are my ethical principles telling me what to do? And respecting the autonomy of others. So think about these. And good leaders are continually checking their brains and balances on this. Well, a couple of other thoughts in the short time I have to talk about leadership. And here's one. How do we get to be big picture thinkers? Well, actually, it's not entirely impossible. Here's some research I did, and it shows 4 ways of doing it. The first element is, first element is you need to be detached. It's very important to have emotional control, to separate yourself back from the problem, to see the big picture, that make reality your friend bit. At the same time, you can't just look at one problem. It's like these single issue activists only worry about the one thing in the world. There's so many things to work on. We have to think systemically. How does a big system work? How does the animal move all 4 legs at the same time and not just one leg, which we just focus on? We've got to make the whole system work, understand independent wholes. And you can learn that through systems thinking, and that can be taught by good business schools. The next one, which is almost the opposite of detachment, is you're dispassionate at the top and you're passionate at the bottom. And you have to be able to imagine and visualize. It's not just reason. Imagination is a coming together. It's a vision of seeing things that pulls a whole lot together. You need to practice. You need to practice visualization, practice seeing things differently, imagining what this could be like. And this is one of the least understood attributes of management, but the one that Einstein said was most important, and so do many other people. And all of these are no use unless you've got a really strong sense of purpose. Beyond the individual, beyond you. What is your purpose in life? What are you going to try and bring? What value is your organization going to bring to society? And those are the companies that really survive. Nobody is perfect, and none of us will get that right all the time. So I would really focus on that. And the final thing I'm going to talk about is for us as leaders and developing skills, because this is a difficult graph produced by Spall, and it says of 100 people who start matric, 60 write, maybe 37 pass. That means that 63 people who start school, don't get matric. Of those 37, 12 go to university, 6 get some sort of undergrad, and 4 get a degree within 6 years. And if you're talking about master's degrees, you maybe got 0.5 of humanity in South Africa gets that. So most of the time when we're thinking about executive education, we're thinking about this very narrow lot. But the reality is that most people are stuck in here. Most people didn't have the full opportunity. Many, many great people in our organizations are supervisors. The average age of an MBA is 41, but of our level 5 program, which you can do with a matric, the average age is 37. Which means that if you're really focusing on developing people, we have to concentrate on lifelong learning. You have to believe in these people. You have to believe that just because you're not educated doesn't mean you're not intelligent. We confuse education with intelligence. So if you're educated, you may be intelligent, but if you're not educated, it doesn't mean you're stupid. On the contrary, we have a country full of millions of intelligent people who never got the opportunity. Our job as educators is to bring skills to people in mid-career who've missed out on education, as well as getting people into it, take all that rich talent to supervisors, middle managers, junior managers who haven't got the qualifications, bring them forward again onto a qualification pathway, and in our organizations become massive skills developers, because universities aren't able to do it. Only 45% of our population have the skills for the current economy, let alone the new economy that's coming along. We have to do it as educators and as businesses. So you want a mandate? That's our mandate. Lifelong learning, fantastic learning, and do it ourselves. Thank you very much. And that's me over in my 15 minutes.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Pedley. It truly, you brought forth questions, or rather you provoked questions that we should be asking ourselves. Particularly, I enjoyed the point where you just said, make reality your friend. And the true reality of this time is we are in a pandemic. And how do we then, instead of regressing, how do we progress, move forward, and advance ourselves? Most importantly, I appreciated the idea that you relayed, that we need to bring skills forward into a qualification pathway. I think that is so critical. How are we, instead of interrogating education, how are we evolving it? So thank you very much for that. And we do hope that you will be a continuous contributor at the Skills Development Summit. And hopefully our audience will be able to reach out to us with questions that they have posed to you. And I encourage them to also visit Henley and see if they can get a qualification there. Thank you so much, Mr. Pedley.
It's an absolute
Breakfast
privilege.
Talks
I'll
with
put that on our
Mashobane Advisory
website.
Services
We're
is a
internationally
weekly
triple
talk with
accredited business school, the
influential
only
speakers
international
who are
MBA in the
leaders
country,
in their
and
respective
the biggest
fields.
scholarship bank
Join
in
our
Africa, and the
Breakfast
fastest
Talks
growing
every
business school
Thursday
in Africa.
mornings
That's
at
my Anglo
7:30
Zone.
a.m. to
Thank
learn
you.
from
Wow.
different topics presented
Thank you
by
so much.
expert
Thank you
speakers.
very much for that.
Whether you're on your desk,
Right,
in your
thank
car,
you.
or in your
Okay.
pajamas, our Breakfast Talks are thought-provoking and a productive use of your time. Breakfast Talks, brought to you in partnership with the Grill Room and Sushi Bar in Brooklyn, Pretoria.
All right, so government plays a significant role in the tech innovation and strengthening technology innovation in South Africa. And now joining me is Dr. Mboneni Muofe, who is the Deputy Director General of Technology Innovation at the Department of Science and Technology. And thank you very much for joining us, sir.
It's my pleasure. I'm quite excited to be with you today.
All right. Now, perhaps if we can start with the policy framework and the South African context and what you have to look at when you are drawing up these issues, especially when it comes to South Africa.
Yeah, so I think the most exciting inclusions on our latest policy documents has been the two aspects. One, what we call the inclusiveness, and with it, the aspect of transformation. And we have moved in looking at transformation from the traditional transformation as in looking at racial transformation, but beginning to go beyond that and say, let's look at aspects, for example, of spatial transformation. How much of what our policy caters for thinks about innovations in the rural space? How much of what we do think about the fact that there are nine provinces in South Africa and not only 3? And that's basically what we start to build. So we are therefore saying there are a lot of innovation that are potentially being let to die in some of these areas that we're ignoring. So that's really the part of the spatial transformation that I'm looking at. Now, obviously, there are bigger aspects around when you want to have an impact, you need to walk the whole entire population of the country. And the biggest exclusion in the past has been that of women. Now, they make a huge percentage of South African population, but we find that a lot of the previous policies have really not included. And when you look, for example, at the impact, especially in the rural areas, we've got programs that are running, especially in grassroots innovation, indigenous knowledge systems, where women and young people, who are also another aspect of the transformation that we're looking at, are playing a huge role. So this is really the exciting part of our policies that we are looking at as we move towards the goals of the National Development Plan in 2030.
Specifically to pick on the indigenous knowledge systems,
Yeah.
why did you decide that they needed to be included in the innovation space, the tech innovation space?
So what we have really seen is that if you, for example, you have a peek at the medical field, medicine was born out of the natural products, be it plants or animal products. And when we look at our history, indigenous people have been surviving and living for long, not necessarily because of the intervention, to some extent yes, but not necessarily because of the intervention of Western medicine, but because they knew what is it that they're going to take from the plants and the forest around them when they have a particular ailment. And some of those have actually been stolen by some of the big pharma and they are being commercialized. And we realize that if we can provide resources to build and empower them to actually work on and commercialize those, that would be great. And so what we then do is, if you have a claim that a certain plant does this, so we use our scientific laboratories to test whether indeed it does what it is said to be doing, and then you are able to isolate and identify the active pharmaceutical ingredients that are in that particular plant, and then you can indicate that indeed this has been scientifically confirmed. When you have done that, you also realize that some of them didn't really have, for example, an appreciation of business principles. So you then also have programs that assist them, partnering the work that is being done through the Technology Innovation Agency. In some instances, we partner with the Innovation Hub, and then also we also have facilities within the Department of Science and Innovation family, where some of these things can actually be tested and the support can be given even through incubation.
And the consultation processes and the work that goes into drawing up these policy frameworks that you have, especially here, because obviously it needs to also take you to the rural areas, and as you say, that South Africa doesn't have 3, but has 9 provinces. Consultation
Happens at various levels. Firstly, we have a very good relationship with various institutions of higher learning. And the good thing now is obviously the fact that the Department of Science and Innovation now reports to one minister together with our sister government department, now the Department of Higher Education and Training. So that actually creates that synergy that was missing. So we are therefore now even able, for example, just last month, we were launching a partnership with one of the TVET colleges to really expand this. So this is now beginning to allow us to move into a consultative implementation approach. In terms of the formulation of the policies themselves, yes, there were also a whole lot of consultation. Firstly, with the private sector, with other government departments. You might be aware of the whole march that government is running, where we say, if it's an agricultural master plan, you're going to have all the players in the agricultural sector, private and public, and also those that are coming as individual people. So you sit and say, what do we want to get out of agriculture from the innovations point of view, which then contributes to the bigger master plan that will be led by the Department of Agriculture, for example. So those are the consultation that makes sure that everybody is included. So on the IKS space, for example, you then know that the knowledge holders will probably be either the traditional healers or leaders, or even an ordinary man or woman in the village who knows which sort of herbs to use. So those are then part of our engagement with indigenous knowledge holders, which we call them. And we work with them and make sure that after we have agreed and we're
Chris, how are you?
implementing, they also become beneficiaries of whatever.
Not as stressed as what you are.
Oh,
thanks.
I'm
feeling fantastic.
You take someone who's never seen
Your lovely Anne-Marie keeps me in check.
What they've been using for decades and centuries suddenly ends up as a product
I'm
that
gonna
can benefit financially.
I have to steal her from you one of these days.
That is
Oh, you can try. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to have much luck. Morning, France. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, good morning. Is it Beverly, I suppose?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Hello, Beverly, morning. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Can you
you're
hear
all
me?
good. Here's Vishal. I can hear you. We're just waiting. Hi, Vishal. Thank you very much
Good
for
morning.
joining us today.
Good morning.
So if one
Did I
Morning,
pronounce
Chris.
your name right?
Hi, Vishal. And
especially in the aviation space, including an airline. How exciting
Just
can that
waiting
be?
for
So
Brenda
you're the right
and-
person to probably tell us
Thanks.
about
Can you hear
how
me?
funding
Is the
works
audio
in
working?
those particular spaces.
I can hear
Especially when it
everybody.
comes to our
Okay.
innovators who are constantly looking for ways
We'll
to
just,
scale up.
wait,
Morning,
Brenda.
Chris.
Methods that can help them.
Franz,
Thank you
nice
very
to
much
meet you.
for
I
joining us,
saw we were talking on the group.
You've also
Yes.
Franz, nice to meet you
some of the
too.
programs with
Morning,
the
Vishal.
Technology
Morning. Good
Innovation
morning.
Agency.
And,
Can you tell us about what you
Brent.
think of the
Brent,
ideas
sorry,
that you
Brent.
found in the past?
Sandy, I think it's been very
looks
exciting
like
to see
Brenda
you know,
hasn't
South
got
African
her yet.
companies. You know, they have a very different mindset. You know, when I was always concerned, when I've had to judge, companies in the US, in the UK, and European countries, they're thinking globally, yes, they're thinking of problems, but they're also thinking of problems outside their environment, outside their arena. What I've always loved about South African companies, having the opportunity to judge across many programs is they're really trying to solve local problems. They're really going after issues that they see growing up, issues that they've seen their family go through, and things that are very, very uniquely South African, be it problems in clean tech, in this environment, or be it problems in townships.
A bit of a sniffle there,
So
a bit of a cold.
sometimes, maybe the innovation is different if you actually use a gauge or use a lens or a global lens onto South Africa.
Survive this paranoia,
However,
you get a few
I think they're
sniffs
doing
and
the
then
right
off you want to
thing.
go
I mean,
for
end of the day, technology startups were
Well,
supposed
they
to
said this
solve
morning on the
problems
radio.
that
If you
they
feel
see
a
as a
little bit,
problem. And
either
I
you
think
got a
they're
chilly
doing a
or a
fantastic
cold
job
or
in
a...
that.
Rather think it's
One of
COVID,
the
go for a
big
taste.
problems that a
Don't wait.
lot of startups often complain about is funding and how you then take your work to market and scale up. What advice would you give them when it comes to funding?
Look, I have a slightly contrary view, on that particular thing, especially when it comes to South Africa. And the reason I say that is, one has to start a business and then go for funding to grow that business. We have unfortunately gotten stuck in that mindset that, as soon as I have an idea, I need some money to go and try it out.
Our panel
go try it out on your, with your own whatever resources that you can get hang of. Go come up with a minimum viable product and go in the market
I
and do
don't
something.
think I want to
go
have been
prove that your product actually solves a problem, and then start exploring the idea of funding. However, when it comes to funding, I'm just going to introduce you to the idea of crowdfunding for Africa. Where we see funding is a bit limited. It plays an integral role today and going forward. What it essentially allows you to do is it allows you to formalize your friends and family around, as we like to call it. Sometimes, when you believe in something so much so, you should be able to at least go to your friends, neighbors, family, aunts, uncles, and say, listen, I've got an idea, I would like to do something about it. And rather than now asking them for a couple of 100,000 rands, you have the ability to ask for 1,000 rands or 2,000 rands or 5,000 rands. Prior to crowdfunding was introduced, what has happened is most entrepreneurs will pick up the phone. Let's say they're looking for a couple of 100,000 rands. They pick up the phone, they look for those 3 or 4 people they believe have the ability to invest 200 or 300. And that's where the mistake starts, because once they are led down by these 2 or 3 people, and it's not their fault, the entrepreneurs haven't probably done their work, or maybe they're expecting too much from these 2 or 3 people. Now with crowdfunding, at least you have the ability of being able to go to multiple people, sell your idea. That's what an entrepreneur is supposed to do, right? Hustle and sell your idea and sell your concept. If you can't take 1,000 rands out of one person's pocket, maybe you have a lot of work to do. So I think crowdfunding could potentially do some wonderful things for Africa. And secondly, I think we should also start comparing ourselves to other countries, other environments. And if you compare ourselves to other African countries, South American countries, I think with age partnerships they bring on board, with institutions they're connecting to in Switzerland, in the UK, and all sorts of different parts of the world,
all of the areas
I think our environment is a lot better.
Been doing
the grass is always greener on the other side.
Of Johannesburg jurisdiction, I'm not sure if we're going to go from the frying pan into the fire or
how
what.
they manage to internationalize.
You'll see. You'll see.
And the dream is
we actually stopped trading.
Breakfast Talks with Shobane Advisory Services is a weekly talk with influential speakers who are leaders in their respective fields. Mornings at 7:30 a.m. to learn about topics presented by our expert speakers.
Welcome,
Whether you're on your
Mrs.
desk,
Zombela,
in your car,
welcome, Mr.
or
Campbell,
in your pajamas.
and
Our breakfast
thank you
talks
very
are
much
thought-provoking
for joining
and
us.
a
So what,
productive use of your time.
Yeah, what will happen
Breakfast
is
Talks, brought to you in
Mrs. Zombela will
partnership
be
with the Grow
introducing
Room
you
and Sushi Bar
and
in
the
Brooklyn,
topic, and
Pretoria.
then I'll hand over to we can shoot. I think we have approximately, because of time constraints, it won't be the full hour, so we can keep the panel discussion, if I'm quite clear, to about 40 minutes or so, maybe even 30. No, an hour's fine. Okay, so I just got verification that the hour is still okay, but we can reserve maybe 15 to 10 minutes for questions. We'll be going live in the next 2 minutes. Is everybody comfortable? Is everybody ready?
Yes.
Fantastic.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you
I'm
very
quite
much.
excited
Good.
to be with you today.
All right. Now,
Welcome back to the 14th Leadership Skills Development Summit 2021. As mentioned earlier, please don't forget to visit our exhibition, virtual exhibition that is, and also to hashtag Skills Summit 2021. I hope you have your questions. We are more than ready to receive them. And I hope so far you have enjoyed and grown and especially learned, particularly from our previous speakers. Without further ado, we are now embarking on our panel discussions for the day. And the first one, we will be discussing infrastructure delivery, restoring the skills pipeline in partnership with the Human Resource Development Council. And leading the panel this morning is Mrs. Brenda Ndombela, who is the head of Secretariat for Human Resource Development Council. Welcome, Mrs. Ndombela, and thank you very much for joining us. And Brenda will then be introducing our panelists who will be engaging with us this morning. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Good morning to everybody, with special greetings to our Deputy Minister. I'm not sure whether he's still around, but I'm just saying good morning to him. All protocol observed. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our session that is going to be taking place now. As has mentioned, my name is Brenda, and then I'm going to be running this particular session. Welcome to this second session. The panel discussion, it is under infrastructure delivery, restoring the skills pipeline in partnership with the Human Resource Development Council. At this moment, I would like to, and I'm going to hand over to them to introduce themselves. Over to you, panel members.
Hi, good morning. It seems to be mine's the only one that's not muted at the moment. My name is Frans Tua. I'm from a private FET college. Check out my office is in Johannesburg, but we also have offices throughout the country and we operate nationally. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Frans.
Okay, Vishal, I'll jump in. Morning, everybody. My name is CEO of an industry association known as Consulting Engineers South Africa, also more commonly known as CESA. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks, Chris. Thank you for inviting me to this conference as well. Great to meet you, Frans, and Brenda as well. I'm Vishal Lachman. I'm Institution of Civil Engineering, and we are based nationally as well. And we look after the interests and needs and the development of our civil engineers in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishal. We were also expecting a colleague from TITA. Unfortunately, there is no one at the moment. So we will continue with our program. We have a very wide topic that is supposed to be handled by our experts this morning. When we look at infrastructure, infrastructure is divided into a number of areas. We will be handling issues related to ICTs, roads and transport, built environment, electricity, etc., etc. Again, our session is going to be looking at issues that are related to the pipeline. When you look at the pipeline, we are looking at from the foundation stage up to the world of work. We'll be touching on a number of issues that have been touched upon by some of the previous speakers. For example, this is looking at whatever that is supposed to be done from cradle to grave. Absorption of the graduates, how is it done within our country, and how are we going to reposition ourselves when it comes to that? What is the role of professional councils, in relation to what we are going to be handling as part of our heading? Before I allow the panel to start with their presentations or discussions, I would like to share just a slide on our HRD strategy towards 2030, that is talking about skills development and the skills for the economy, for the transformed economy. I'm not sure whether, Bev, we have somebody behind who is going to be beaming the slide that I wanted to talk to. If not, I will just mention the objectives that are under the Human Resource Development Strategy towards 2030, that is looking at the skills for the transformed society. And I hope and wish that all of those issues that we're going to handle here will be covered somewhat, not necessarily as they are within our strategy. One strategic objective about the skills for the transformed society and the economy, it is to ensure that the demand, it is documented and communicated effectively to enable improved supply and demand. And then the next objective is to put in place a skills system that is effective in brokering partnerships to address priority skills needs in the economy. The third one is about improving skills profile, especially of the SMMEs, rural and township enterprises, women, the people with disabilities, and the needs. And the last one, last objective under the skills, it is to improve the skills profile of the employed workforce to enable greater levels of productivity and adaptability to the changing needs of the labor market. Those are the 4 objectives that are there within our HRD strategy. Well, with those words and the introducing our strategy as the HRDC, I would like to hand over to we will start according to the program that we have and request Chris to start with his presentation. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Brenda. Okay, I presume everybody can see that. I'm not going to do a death by PowerPoint, but I think it's important that I have the opportunity to share with you graphically rather than just as a narrative. To illustrate, important is the topic, infrastructure delivery, restoring the skills pipeline in partnership with the human resource development. So it's very important, ladies and gentlemen, that we need to look at the situation systemically, holistically, and with a long-term approach. I think we generally tend to have this assumption that you can just touch here and you can touch there and there's a magic wand and it's all going to, just materialize. But the reality is, and if we talk restoring, it also means sowing new seeds. So essentially, we need to plant new seeds while the current crop grows, and we almost protect it against the insects. If I can use that analogy, all the ills of that hamper their future and further progress. So it's a continuous process. But here's a challenge I'd like to show you, and these are the DBE diagnostic stats. Now, if we don't interrogate these, then we pretty much fall into the definition of insanity. If you look at these numbers, and I must say that this report I got from the DBE, whoever did it made an unfortunate error. This number over here, if you can see my cursor, is actually 5,001, not 45. So it illustrates the issues around maths performance. But if we look at the last 9 years and we look at the numbers, we look at the percentage of pupils that achieved more than, let's say, from 60 to 100%, although I would quite honestly point, realistically, not mine, but those of many of the tertiary institutions have found that you'd need to be above the 60, 69. You'd need to be in the 70% upwards if you're going to survive a tertiary education, maths intense environment. So realistically, from our students, 500,000, that on average over the last nine years in grade 12, we have about 16,000 who would actually be available and have been on average, let's say, over the last 9 years. So 16,000 young people, young learners, then have to choose between your finances, your maths-based types of careers and engineering, and you split that 3 ways. You may be lucky if you get 5,000 going into engineering, number one. But to the point I'm trying to illustrate is, if we've been doing something to improve the situation, then clearly and unfortunately, it's not making any difference. What are we doing? And rethink it, because the numbers are not changing significantly enough. So moving on, and this is important. So where's the starting point? And I'm going to focus on, firstly, an engineering practitioner's life cycle. Very often, and I'm happy to see it in the human resource development strategy, is a strong focus on early childhood development. Because it is indeed true, play is what starts young children off in coping and learning, the various skills that they're going to be require into the future. And there's a strong focus to strengthen that. But I think we may or may not be aware of, as we speak, there's a children's amendment bill out. This bill, unfortunately, according to many people involved in that space, people contend that it's just putting more and more hurdles and making the challenge for having more early childhood development institute. And the bureaucracy, unfortunately, hurts mostly the poor, because for approval becomes so onerous that people eventually give up. Nobody's arguing against quality, but there is that challenge, and that has efforts towards early childhood development. So we need to be able to look at what is the HRD looking at, and the department that's driving the Children's Amendment Bill need to talk to each other, because there may be unintended focuses of the bill amendment. But let's move further on into their career. After the early childhood and this whole schooling process, where you need, competent teachers who actually attend school more frequently than the pupils, that are adept at probably teaching, have a passion for it. We are talking about a 15-year process for any young child starting at the age of 3. And then the life to another 4-year engineering education program. If you do well, it may end up being 5. Then you've got to go on and you require another 3 years. Now, this is because engineering and most of your practical built environment types of careers are based on applied sciences. So you learn all of you gain the knowledge, but you've got to go put it into practice and make things work using your theory. So that will require another 3 to 4 years. Then you're registered as a professional. All too often you hear people talking about how can we fast track people in this space here. Firstly, you may be limited by numbers, but you also may be limited by the fact that there are in industry at the moment a lull in work projects. companies only at 80% utilization levels. But let me not dwell on that. Let's move on into your career as an engineering practitioner. Now, you have a choice. You may become an expert, technical expert, or you may end up being a manager in an enterprise that depends on your engineering knowledge and skills, which is great. Problem is, is in many of our environments, we tend not to recognize the technical expert and remunerate them adequately. So everybody wants to go and become the manager. And so we lose that technical depth because of the remuneration aspects. And then, lastly, I also want to show you that very often our practitioners retire, but they never fully retire. They remain active, even I think up to the age of 80. So long beyond the retirement age of 60 or 65, many practitioners still remain active. Now, very important in this family is we have to look at the full ambit. We can't only look at the engineer and the engineering technologists, the engineering professionals who've gone and pursued tertiary education. And my colleague Frans will talk more about them, but our artisans that grow into supervisor inspectors, that even for the built environment could be draftsmen, architectural or engineering. So we need to look at these all in balance. It doesn't help for everybody to be pursuing one channel, and we find we are constrained because there is no engineer that knows how to lay bricks sufficient to build a house or do the wiring for the electrician or the plumbing. So we need to think about this issue very broadly. And the point I'd like to leave you here with is, though we are trying to strengthen the TVET colleges, it's one of the strategies in the HRD plan, there are some fault lines worth reconsidering, Brenda, in the HRD strategy. For example, your feedstock for lecturers should actually come from artisan supervisors, and then maybe, if some of them still exist, master craftsmen, not masters or PhDs. I, with all the respect in the world, I do not believe they have sufficient skills and knowledge to be able to relay what is required for future artisans to ply their craft. They may know a lot more, but at too different and higher level for that. So we need to rethink that if we're going to get it right. I'm time constrained, so I'm not going to dwell on this, but there are gems. We've got a wonder how some schools like Mbilwi and in Dendron, level of grade 12s that make it into engineering programs. And if we look at our NDP, we may need to move the target. We've run out of time. There's just no way that we're going to achieve 50% in maths and science in 80% of our schools in the next 9 years. Not if those numbers have flatlined over the last 9 years, unless there's some miracle. And likewise, again, 450,000 is almost the average of the. So I think we need to do more work there. And yeah, let me move on to my closing remarks here, so I can give my colleagues a chance. We have a huge challenge. It's going to take a strong partnership between public and private sector. There are many issues that distract us. I'm going to be blunt. There's a lot of institutional racism in our learning institutions, in schools that we're dealing with, inadequate buildings, absence of performance management of errant teachers, and. We have to get these distractions out of the way so we can focus on the greater challenge. And that is the challenge that we need to take the development of our society that's sufficiently educated and may indeed realize the wisdom of the words of Madiba. And 3 of his many quotes very quickly. We all know the top one: education is the most powerful weapon. Yes. The power of education extends beyond the development of skills. We need economic success, and it can contribute to nation building engine of personal development through education, that the daughter of a peasant becomes a doctor, son of a mine worker becomes head of that mine, child of a farm worker becomes president of a great nation. And it is what we make of what we have, not what we are given, that separates one person from another. So that's my, hopefully a platform that I've laid for the rest of my colleagues and for the remainder of the discussion. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Chris. I would like to follow a process of requesting all the presenters to continue to present, and then I'll summarize at the end. So for now, I'm going to request the next speaker. Thank you.
Frans, can I proceed? Let me be the next speaker. Thank you, Chairperson.
Okay.
I don't have a present conversation, but let me share some thoughts. And thanks, Chris. You did set a good platform to start off with. Chairperson, I'd like to use your analogy of the pipeline, and maybe we'll start with that. You know, the pipeline is what in civil engineering what we would call our network infrastructure. And it's a good analogy for the simple reason that it is able to meet demands through the provision of supply. Typically, that's how our network infrastructure works. So as we would talk about supply, and Chris did allude to some of those issues regarding STEM and mathematics, that feeds into the education discussion and perhaps the improvement that we would need to make in that. Now, along the way, using that pipeline analogy going forward, we have influences, we have academia that plays a role, we have one's family, civil society, other educators, and technology as well. That tends to be rolled up into the experience of one coming through school to the tertiary institutions and then into a workplace or any entrepreneurial type of initiative. Now, along that way, there's development that happens. And in order for the supply to work and be part of the system of skills development in the country, there has to also be a place that it is demanded. Now, over time, in my opinion, the demand for such skills has waned in a sense that we've not had the projects that we would have liked to see happen. And I'm talking about probably in the last 10 or so years, where we focused, I would say, alternatively and not too much on infrastructure development. So if the demand for such skills is not physically there by way of projects for engineers and technical and all of the stakeholders involved in the provision of infrastructure, then we have a backlog and we have a congestion that's going to happen in the system. And I sense that's the case right now. We have engineers coming out of if I go back to the pipeline again, we have engineers coming ready for the workplace and to enter the workplace, but they don't have work they don't have employment opportunities. So that is one of the problems that I think we need to work on. And we did speak about relationships and the level of fragmentation in our industry. We all seem to dig our heels into various types of beliefs, I would say, in terms of how we would solve this problem. And the lack of convergence on that is perhaps exacerbating or prolonging the issue with regard to meaningful deployment of skills that are currently available. So in my mind, there's currently a lack or an imbalance in the skills that are available. On one front, we have construction firms and perhaps engineering firms that are having to retrench individuals that are skilled because of the lack of projects. And on the other side, we have perhaps in the public sector a lack of skills for various other reasons. And there's a mismatch currently on the go. And we would like to see from an institution's point of view, a bit of leveling happening such that skills can be deployed into the right places to help capacitate generally the industry of infrastructure. Now, when it comes to the beliefs that I mentioned about, that kind of touches on why we need leaders. And leaders and leadership is a really large topic and it for many days, to be honest with you. But I think what's more important in terms of leadership is effective leadership at the time that it is demanded. Now, in this time, we think, or I would say, I think, what's important is the ability to bring stakeholders together to believe that we need to fix the problems. Unemployment, for example, is still very stubbornly attached to the conversation about the economy of South Africa. So when we talk about the economy, unemployment is a very important KPI to measure our socioeconomic progress. And that is stubbornly high for many years coming. And we have not seemed to have made meaningful impact or progress towards that. So as much as we talk about education, which is really important, and that sort of addresses the SDG goal number 4, which is access to quality education, it transforms in that pipeline to start attending to the SDG number 9, which is infrastructure industrialization, linked to our economic reconstruction and recovery plan. So I think that's where the nuance happens and the transformation happens for our technical individuals looking to provide infrastructure. How do you educate yourself meaningfully and then transform to become actively involved in the economy? And that opportunity is not clear anymore. So I think from my perspective, that idea of balance that I spoke about in terms of the skills distribution across the industry, that needs to happen. But more importantly, 3 focus areas as it applies to leadership could assist. One is strategy, and that seems to be used very loosely. Not many people maybe appreciate how important it is to have a strategy that we stick to across various eras that is agreed by ourselves, as comes into that discussion in terms of how we do our agreements along the lines of developing this economy. And the second one is leadership itself. In other words, who is the leader? What is he about? What are the defining beliefs of that leader? And are those beliefs relevant to solving problems that we have? We may have leaders excellently, with excellent qualifications, really well equipped for solving another problem, but maybe not to solve the problem we have today, for example. So it's important to have the right forms of leaders or the right types of leaders, and there's processes to follow in how do we achieve that. Then the third one is technical excellence. And technical excellence requires one to appreciate the content that they have received at the academic institutions, to appreciate what they can do with such content, and to grow that content knowledge along their life's journey. So those 3, should we focus on intimately together with the enablers of social compacting and bringing about projects and the like, I think we have a chance to unlock and make this system, coming back to your pipe analogy, work and flow again, because flow is where the important successes can be managed. And right now it seems to be like the flow is restricted. The last one is trust. And trust breeds a lot of relevance when it comes to leadership. I believe there's currently a trust deficit, if I use a broad sweeping statement, that we tend to perhaps be suspicious of other stakeholders and what their agendas are. And are they working towards a common good? And can we ever work towards a common good? And I think that's an important factor. And building trust starts with a conversation in my mind. And I think these are good platforms to do that. And I think that's where we need to move forward from in terms of helping ourselves solve this problem. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Vishal. As stated before, we would like to have all the discussants, all the panelists, to present their discussions or to make their own presentations. So I'll hand over to Franz, then I will summarize at the end. Thanks. Over to you, Franz.
Thanks, Brenda. I just want to, can you see my slide?
Yes, we can. Thanks. You can go ahead.
All right, okay. All right, thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, just very quickly, when we got the topic to talk today or be part of the panel, I looked at the topics is restoring a skills pipeline, and I thought to myself, what are we looking at? I'm looking at quantity, I'm looking at quality, or looking at all three categories. And I think, from my perspective, I think we're looking at all three different categories. Just a bit of background on who we are. So the comments I'm going to make are that follows shortly with other slides. Just to give some background who we are. And so as you can see, we're a private FED college, primarily focusing in the building and civil construction industry since 2000. And our base that we train is normally artisans, your supervisors or foremen, construction managers, small contract developers. Paths that we follow are CETA QSTO registered learnerships and apprenticeships. We do CETA QSTO registered skills programs and short technical skills courses, as we call portable skills. Our rotation is with while we register with the Department of Higher Education, the private FED college. We're accredited with the construction CETA and also. I think if we look at, I'm going to look at more the artisan level, whereas Chris and Yvonne spoke about the more on the engineering degrees and higher up. I think if we look at pointers to restore are based on, say, 20 years in the industry. I think what we're finding more and more these days are things such as we're getting fewer, well, we need fewer crisis competency training and more proactive long-term planned formal skills programs and apprenticeships. It seems to be something that's emerging very strongly these days. Companies need competent people to work on specific projects, and I'm particularly talking about construction companies. And then the individuals do have a fair amount of experience, but they were not necessarily trained. Then in order to be allowed onto a construction site is competent. And then we are faced with crisis competency training or certification. I think what we've seen over the last couple of years, and I think it's since 2010 when we had the World Cup, that with the decline in construction activity, fewer and fewer apprenticeships were signed on by construction companies. And I think we need more contractors that are required to willingly come forward to sign on apprenticeships and take ownership of these apprentices. One thing that we've been asked a question is that there are bursaries and other funding models for higher education development for university students, degrees and so forth, that will cover things like the full training, and tertiary model does not exist for your artisans. And I think once, in looking forward and the skills pipeline going forward, I think maybe we need to look at include funding models that include for accommodation for candidates that want to go the apprenticeship route as well. I think it's very important that we ensure that the training durations and quality are in line with QSTO and SOCOP policies and guidelines. I think once again, talking about the crisis competency, we have come across that training durations are becoming less and less and shorter, which does not do justice to the quality of the learners leaving the system and entering the marketplace. And I think another comment from my side is that apprentices require better or intense on-site coaching and mentoring from the contractor and the qualified staff. That's something that is what where we stand not really happening adequately enough on site. I think looking forward to the new skills, we need more exposure to new technology developments. And I'm talking about partnerships with suppliers, manufacturers in the construction industry. I think for me, looking at the artisans, the objective is to restore the status of being an artisan as an elite career, choice to be proud of. It seems still to be the orphan of career choices. But at the end of the day, two bricks on top of each other, nobody else than artisans. An artisan, to become an artisan must be a lead career choice. Be very proud of. If we look at construction supervisors, We need more supervisors coming through the system that do the full qualifications. Your national certificate, construction contracting at level 4 or level 5, what's happening in industry. What we also seen is that we need for them to have more depth, focus on knowledge and experience in the trades that are being supervised as positions, but they don't necessarily have